After giving over the teaching which explains the source, construct, and import of stories from ancient times, look at around Torah 60, Reb Nachman said, "Today I said 3 things contrary to what the world says. The world says that telling over stories is propitious to induce sleep. And I said that telling over stories is propitious to arouse people from sleep. The world says that from talking about things nothing can be born. And I said that the tzaddik's talking about things arouses people from their sleep, which causes barren women to conceive. The world says that the true tzaddik of towering stature doesn't need a lot of money, because why does he need money? And I said that a true tzaddik needs all the fortune of the world." Rabbi Nachman expressed his desire that the stories should be published, also in the spoken Yiddish, and he said that it is possible for it to be very easy for a barren woman to read from them any story. And he said that it is possible for it to be very easy for a barren woman to read from them any story, and through this she would have a good conception and merit to have children. Nanach Nachman Miyoman. Nanach Nachman Miyoman. Sipurei masios. First words at the beginning of the Sefer is بع'ה, to make known and to reveal that every word that is written in the book is holy of holies, according to the secrets of the Torah. One shall not think that these are simple stories, for the stories that are in this book were told by the great tzaddik Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. May his merit protect us. His intention was to teach us how to serve God. Would it be that we should understand the great secrets and moral guidance that are in these stories? Then we will be proper Jews as we should be. May the Almighty send us the Mashiach quickly in our time. Amen. The first introduction. Whatever he was, his name has already been given, and it is known that he is man. This is the Torah of the holy man, one who is worthy of completing the form of man. For this is the entire man. We are speaking of our glorious master, teacher, and rabbi, the crown of our glory, the pride of our strength, the holy, awesome Rebbe, the great lamp, the highest lamp, the beautiful, holy lamp. His name is holy, our master and Rebbe, the master Rabbi Nachman. May the memory of the saint and the holy man be a blessing. He was a great grandson of the holy, awesome, godly Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov. May the memory of the saint and holy man be a blessing. The people of Israel have already enjoyed his enlightenment in his holy, wondrous works which have already been published. Men saw them and rejoiced, and the upright were ecstatic. The truth has shown its own way. Now you can see what else is in our pouch. It is a collection of wondrous, awesome tales, which we were worthy of hearing mouth to mouth from the Rebbe's holy lips. He perceived and he pondered and composed many parables. The Rebbe disguised high and mighty concepts and hid them in his stories in wondrous, awesome ways. This was the way things were originally done in Israel, through redemption and interchanging. When people wanted to speak of God's hidden mysteries, they would speak in allegory and parable, hiding in many disguises the concealed secrets of the Torah, the king's hidden treasury. Thus, after telling the story of the exchanged children, the Rebbe said that in ancient times, when the initiates discussed Kabbalah, they would speak in this manner, making use of stories and parables until the time of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, author of the Zohar. They would not openly use explicit Kabbalistic terms. In most cases, after a number of stories, the Rebbe would reveal some hints to the mysteries alluded to in the story. There would be some allusion as to the significance of the words, but it was very little, less than a drop in the ocean. We will discuss some of these allusions given after the stories in their proper place. Until now, we kept these stories in our private files, but many people have said to us, "Why don't you show us this good?" Many members of our group have a deep longing and yearning to be able constantly to hear the words of the living God that were spoken by our holy rabbi, especially in the stories that he told. Until now, the stories were not available except in the form of handwritten manuscripts, produced by various scribes. These manuscripts contain so many errors that the main point is often lost. Therefore, people came to us with great yearning and persuaded us with great longing. until we had no other choice but to fulfill their desire and bring this work to press. The Rebbe himself also expressed such a desire. Once he declared that he wanted to print the sipurei masios, saying in the presence of many people, "I would like to print the book of stories. It should have the Hebrew written on top and the Yiddish vernacular on the bottom." He also once said, "What can people find to complain about this? After all, they are nice stories to tell." We heard words such as these from his holy lips. This is what motivated us to bring this work to press. Of course, we are not deluding ourselves, since we realize full well that the Rebbe has had much opposition. However, truth is its own witness. We have an obligation to do God's will, and God will then do as He sees fit. He who wants to listen will listen, and he who wants to refuse will refuse. Also, thank God, providence has helped us so that the Rebbe's sacred works have become popular among the holy people. In every congregation in the community of Israel, his words provide the people with joy and happiness. They are as sweet as honey in their mouths. All of them are satiated and enjoy his good. It is like marrow and fat that satisfies their souls, so that with joyous lips their mouths sing praise. More people are on our side than are on the side of those who dispute the truth, speaking about the tzaddik with arrogance, pride, and scorn, and making up accusations that are totally unimaginable. We cannot speak at length about this, since it is among God's hidden mysteries. How many worlds are turned upside down because of the disputes that have currently become more prevalent between scholars and tzaddikim? What can be done by a person who comes after the king? What has been done is done. Nevertheless, we wish to inform everyone that our intent in printing these stories is solely for the sake of members of our group who wish to find shelter in the Rebbe's holy shadow, yearning, seeking, and searching to hear these holy words. The words may be printed in a book, but they are the same as if they had been proclaimed in a great congregation. Moreover, we see that these stories have already begun to spread in writing through many manuscripts. There is no difference between words in a handwritten manuscript and words in a printed book. Furthermore, the words were never meant to be kept secret. Whoever has eyes will see, and whoever has a heart will understand. Regarding these stories, it could be said, it is not an empty thing from you. As our sages teach, if it is empty, then it is from you. That is, it is your own fault. The words of these stories stand in the highest places. We heard the Rebbe say explicitly that every word of these holy stories has tremendous meaning, and that anyone who changes even a single word of these stories from the way that they were told is taking very much away from the story. The Rebbe also said that these stories are original concepts, chidishim, that are very wondrous and awesome. They contain extraordinary, hidden, deep meanings. They are fit to be preached in public, and one may stand in the synagogue and tell any one of these stories. They are extremely lofty, awesome, original concepts. Moreover, if a person's heart has attained perfection, and he is expert in the sacred works, especially in the books of the Zohar and the writings of the Ari, then if he fully concentrates his mind and heart on these stories, he will be able to understand and know a small portion of the illusions found in them. Also, in most places, these stories contain wondrous, highly motivating moral lessons, musar, which an intelligent person can understand by himself. Most of these stories will arouse the heart and draw it very close to God. They will cause a person to repent before God with ultimate sincerity, so that he will dedicate himself fully to Torah and serving God at all times, turning away completely from all worldly vanities. If a person looks at these stories sincerely, he will see this with his mind's eye. The ultimate meaning of these stories, however, is far above the grasp of normal human intelligence. It is deep. Who can discover it? It does not pay to praise these stories overmuch, since they are far above our understanding. The more one tries to praise their greatness and depth, the more one takes away from them. The only reason that we have spoken at all was to arouse the hearts of the members of our group, so that they not forget the wonders the Rebbe showed them. Through the few allusions that he revealed to us after each story, he showed the implication of the words, but still, it was only like seeing gestures from a great distance. It is true that we have written down some of the allusions that we heard from his holy lips. However, it is obvious to any intelligent person that seeing something in a book is not the same as actually hearing it from the author. This is all the more true of allusions such as these, which are not comprehensible except through such gestures as the movements of the head, winks of the eye, motions of the hand, and the like. Only by seeing these can one begin to understand, and one is even then astounded by what one's eyes have seen. From the distance he will see the greatness of God and his holy Torah clothed in many garments, as explained in all the sacred texts. This is how far we can go with a few words, even though they contain very much. Our hearts are still filled with terror. Where is the scribe, and where is the one who can weigh the outcome? From where will our help come? Who will be moved for us for what has been consumed? Who will stand up for us? Mi yanud. However, the reading here may be mi yager lanu eish oichlu. Who among us shall dwell with the devouring fire? Who will be moved for us for what has been consumed? Who will stand up for us? We lift our heart, our hands to God in heaven. Into his hands we entrust our souls. To you, God, we lift up our souls. Until now, your mercy has helped us. Help us, for we are depending on you. May God's pleasantness rest upon us until the righteous teacher comes to our community and our holy, glorious temple is rebuilt. May we look upon Sion, the city of our solemn gatherings. May our eyes behold the King in his glory quickly in our days. Amen. These are my words as writer, typesetter, and transcriber, to eat to satisfaction and to cover ancient things. Signed, the insignificant Nosson, son of my father, our Rebbe and master Naftali Hertz. May God protect him and keep him, of Nemerov, and son-in-law of the great Rebbe, the saintly one, renowned all over the world. His holy, honorable name is our master Rabbi David Tzvi. May the memory of the righteous be a blessing in the world to come, who was head of the rabbinical court in the holy congregation of Kremenetz and its environs, the holy congregation of Sharagrod, and the holy congregation of Moholov and its environs. Before the Rebbe began telling the first story in this book, he declared, "Many hidden meanings and lofty concepts are contained in the stories that the world tells. These stories, however, are deficient. They contain many omissions. They are also confused, and people do not tell them in the correct order. What begins the story may be told at the end, and the like. Nevertheless, the folk tales that the world tells contain many lofty hidden mysteries. The Baal Shem Tov, may the memory of a tzaddik and holy man be a blessing, was able to bring about a unification yichid through telling a story. When he saw that the supernal channels were defective and it was not possible to rectify them through prayer, he would rectify and unify them by telling stories." The Rebbe spoke about this. Then he began to tell the story on the following page. He said, "I told this story while on a journey. It is important to realize that the stories here are for the most part, if not all, completely new stories that have never been told. The Rebbe created them with his holy mind based on the lofty perception that he gained through divine inspiration. He would clothe his perceptions with a particular story, and the story itself would be a demonstration of the awesome, great, lofty perception that he experienced, as well as what he saw in the place that he reached. The Rebbe would sometimes relate ordinary folk tales, but he would embellish them. He would change the order of the story so that it was very different than the original folk tale. In this book, however, only one or two such modified folk tales are included. All the other stories are totally new and original. When the Rebbe of blessed memory began telling stories, he said, "I am now beginning to tell stories. Ich will schon unheiben masios der Zeilen. Ich will schon unheiben masios der Zeilen." His intent was as if to say, "I must tell stories because my lessons and conversations are not having any effect in bringing you back to God." All his life he made great effort to bring us close to God, but when all this did not help, he began to engage in telling stories. It was around this time that the Rebbe taught the lesson that begins, Rabbi Shimon said, "It is a time to do for God. They have disregarded your Torah." This is speaking of the Torah of the Ancient One. It is printed in the first book on page 157, lesson 60. At the end of this lesson, the Rebbe speaks a bit about stories. He said that people may be asleep all their lives, but through stories told by a true through stories told by a true tzaddik, they can be awakened. See what is written there. There are some stories that are in the midst of years. However, there are other stories from ancient times that are included in the concept of the Ancient One. If you study the entire lesson well, you will have some awareness and understanding as to the lofty implications of these stories, as well as the Rebbe's holy intent in telling them. If you study the entire lesson well, you will have some awareness and understanding as to the lofty implications of these stories, as well as the Rebbe's holy intent in telling them. In most cases, even the plain, simple meaning of these stories can strongly motivate a person toward God. All these stories consist of awesome mysteries, but aside from their secret meanings, they have great power to motivate everyone toward God. Be strong. Masios, the second introduction. When we printed these stories the first time, we heard an uproar declaring that it was not proper to publish stories such as these. To repeat their words, however, would merely be superfluous. In our first introduction, we have already quoted the words of the Rebbe, who said that he wanted to have these stories published. He said, "What can people find to complain about this? After all, they are nice stories." Innumerable stories have been published in the world, and no one opens his mouth to complain. Also, most of the stories that the Rebbe told teach very important lessons. Good examples are such stories as the Master of Prayer and the Seven Beggars. Moreover, when one delves into most of the stories, aside from the hidden meanings, one will find lessons of wisdom and good conduct. Furthermore, we have published notes after these stories, along with some wondrous, awesome allusions that the Rebbe himself revealed, as discussed earlier. Nevertheless, we resolved that we would bring up a number of other points, which, according to our humble opinion, cast some light on the allusions contained in these stories. Whoever wishes to add to this may do so. It is known that in all the books of the Zohar and Tekinei Zohar, as well as in the writings of the Arizal, of the Ari, the king's daughter alludes to the divine presence, Shechina, and the congregation of Israel, as it were. We have been given authority to use such allegorical language from the earliest masters, whose words are our very life. Thus, both King David and his son Shlomo made considerable use of such expressions. The expression "king's daughter" is used in this sense in the verse, "All glorious is the king's daughter indoors." There are also many similar expressions. Furthermore, the entire Song of Songs, which is Holy of Holies to the extent that the entire world is not fit for it, is built on this foundation. Such usage is also found in many places in the writings of the Ari and the books of the Zohar. It is thus taught, he who kills the snake is given the king's daughter, which is prayer. This is even more explicit in the teachings of the old man Sabo the Savo in the Zohar, which speaks of the beautiful girl who has no eyes. There are too many cases such as these to recount. Similarly, in the Yehi Rotzen, may it be your will, prayer recited before saying psalms, we use the expression to attach the wife of youth with her beloved. Likewise, and in the Shem Yichid, for the sake of unification prayer found in Shari Tzion, to be recited before putting tefillin, we say that it is being done so that the bridegroom should embrace the bride with his left hand under her head. See the entire prayer in the source. It is immediately apparent from the writings of the Ari that the entire foundation of Kabbalah involves the unification of the concepts of the bridegroom and the bride. These writings explain that all the divine names and emanations, spherois, as well as the entire linkage, hishtalshalis of the supernal universes, depict the form of a human male. Every part of the body has a precise spiritual counterpart. Also discussed in these writings are the concepts of union, intercourse, pregnancy, birth, nursing, and raising a young boy and girl until they come of age. These are discussed at very great length in the Eitz Chaim and Pri-Eitz Chaim. There are also allusions to these in the Idra Rabu, in the portions of Nasoi and Hazinu. This is also a major theme in the Song of Songs, which speaks of all the parts of the bridegroom's body as praised by the bride, and all the parts of the bride's body as praised by the bridegroom. In the Medrash, our sages also liken the giving of the Torah to a wedding. Our sages thus comment on the verse on the day of his wedding, stating that it alludes to the giving of the Torah. Commenting on the verse, Moshe brought the people out of the camp to greet God, our sages state, like a bridegroom going out to greet his bride. The Holy Shabbos is likewise referred to as both a bride and a queen. We thus inaugurate the Shabbos with the song, Come, my friend, to greet the bride. We conclude by saying, Come, O bride. As mentioned earlier, our sages liken the entire joining of the supernal universes to their root, to the joining of the bridegroom to the bride. This is because in the image of God he made man. Thus all the parts of both the male and female body form the image of God. It is thus written, God created man in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. We also say in the wedding blessings, Blessed are you, God, who created humanity in his image, in the image of his structures form. In the image of his structures form. And through him made a structure that will last for all time. All this is because man and woman are literally a counterpart of the divine. Between them, man and woman have the letters of the tetragrammaton, Yid Ke Vav Ke. If a couple is worthy, the divine presence rests between them, since he provides the Yid and of the divine name, and she provides the Hey. All this is well known and obvious to all. All the ancients used this type of language, alluding to the closeness between God and Israel as the joining of the bridegroom and the bride. In its highest root, our entire mode of serving God alludes to the joining of the bridegroom and bride. That is, the joining of the Blessed One, the Blessed Holy One, Kitche Brichi, and His Divine Presence, Shechina. This is discussed in all the books of the Zohar and forms the main theme of the writings of the Ari. Also in the Kinos for Tisha B'Av, in the elegy beginning, then when Yirmiyahu went, where we bewail the exile of the divine presence and the congregation of Israel, we say, Yirmiyahu found a beautiful woman who had become repulsive. Furthermore, the rectification of the 3 watches, taken from the Zohar Chadash, also uses such an expression, thus she bewails her husband. See the exact wording there. From all this and from many similar cases, it is obvious that the exile of the divine presence and the congregation of Israel is alluded to as an account of the loss of the king's daughter and her being far from her beloved. In the Bahir, cited in the additions to the Zohar, the text comments on the verse, Come, my beloved, let us go out to the field. It speaks of a king who lived in the innermost of chambers. The king married off his daughter and also gave her away as a gift. Because of his love for her, he sometimes calls her my sister, since they both come from the same place. Sometimes he calls her my daughter because she is his daughter, and at other times he calls her my mother. Commenting on the verse, the crown that his mother gave him, our sages speak about a king who had a daughter, whom he loved so much that he called her my mother. Throughout the entire book of Proverbs, faith and the Torah are referred to as the good wife, the woman of valor. Conversely, false belief and heresy are referred to as an evil woman and a prostitute. This is explained in Rashi's commentary and in all the words of our sages. There is also a story told by the Baal Shem Tov at the very end of Toldos Yaakov Yosef, which speaks of a merchant and his wife who were at sea. That work explains that the God-fearing woman is the congregation of Israel. Since God has revealed all this to us through his early prophets, saints, and sages, one can study these stories with an eye to the truth, trying to understand them and plumb their depths, and one will discover wondrous, awesome concepts. Admittedly, it may be impossible to grasp the true meaning of the stories or their construction and sequence from the beginning to the end. Nevertheless, even if a person gains only a very small amount of understanding, it will be very sweet to his soul. The first story is the lost princess. This is speaking of the mystery of the exile of the divine presence Shekhinah. This exile of the divine presence began even before the creation of the universe, this being the mystery of the shattering of vessels. This is the mystery of the verse. This is the mystery of the verse. These are the kings who reigned in Edom before any king reigned in Israel. Immediately after Adam was created, he had the task of rectifying this. He was to bring all the supernal universes back to their proper places. Thus, immediately after the world was created, God's kingdom would have been revealed, just as it will be in the Messianic era. However, Adam was not careful to avoid eating from the tree of knowledge. In the story, this is alluded to by the king's viceroy not standing up to the test and eating from the apple. Through eating from the tree of knowledge, Adam brought a great spiritual blemish to the world. This caused the divine presence to descend even lower, until it was in the realm of the other side, as is known. Later, Noach wanted to rectify this. He was unsuccessful because he drank wine and became drunk. This being the mystery of the verse, he drank the wine and became drunk. This is explained in the sacred texts as being the concept of what is man that he should become drunk. Noach failed the test by drinking wine, as the Torah explicitly states. From that time on, all the saints of each generation were involved in completing this rectification. This will continue until the Mashiach comes, when the final rectification will occur. But besides speaking of the search for cosmic rectification, the story also alludes to every person and every time. Every individual experiences almost every phase in this story. Every Israelite must constantly engage in this rectification, elevating the divine presence from exile, raising up the divine presence from the dust, and bringing the holy kingdom out from among the idolaters and forces of the other side into which she has fallen. This is the mystery of everything that we do to serve God. All the observances, good deeds, and Torah study that we engage in throughout our lives, all these revolve around this point. As discussed in the sacred texts, this is true of even the most simple people among the masses, who do not know right from left. Even they can be worthy of following the straight path according to their level, so as to turn aside from evil and do good. Even the simplest person, if his eye looks straight ahead, knows what the Torah forbids, and can turn away from evil and choose good. If he does that, then all the rectifications in the supernal worlds are automatically made through him, and he is worthy of raising the divine presence from where it has fallen. It all depends on how much he can rectify and purify himself. Therefore, every Israelite is actively engaged in searching for the king's daughter, so as to return her to her father, just as she was in her girlhood. Just as she was in her girlhood. This is the mystery of the verse. She shall return to her father's house as in her girlhood, and then she can eat of her father's bread. Israel as a whole is likened to the king's viceroy, since they rule the world. Just as God brings the dead to life and heals the sick, so does Israel. Commenting on the verse, say to Tzion, you are my people, the Zohar says, do not read Ami, meaning my people, but Imi, meaning with me, making the verse read, you are with me. God says, just as I can make heaven and earth with my words, so can you. There are many similar teachings. Therefore, to the extent that each individual serves God, he is, as it were, searching for the divine presence and the congregation of Israel to bring it out of exile. Conversely, as it were, the divine presence reveals itself to that person from the deep exile where she has concealed and hidden herself. She comes to him secretly and reveals to him where she is dwelling and what he can do to find her. This is expressed in the story where the king's daughter reveals to the viceroy what he must do to free her. The methods provided there are explained in a very simple and transparent manner. It is the Rebbe's way in most stories that in the course of the story he provides words of encouragement according to the simple meaning, as one who reads the stories can see. Thus a person must choose a place for himself and set himself a routine of repentance and fasting, constantly and steadily yearning for God, so that he will be worthy of having a conception of him. One must desire that he reveal his kingdom in the world, so that every created thing should know that you have made him, everything formed should know that you have formed him, and all who have breath in their mouths, and that his kingdom rules over all. The raising of the divine presence from exile consists primarily of bringing about the recognition of God's kingship in full faith and truth. Then everyone, great and small alike, will be aware of God, and the kingdom will be God's. A person begins to do this and chooses for himself a place for meditation and serving God, longing and yearning for Him. Sometimes, after a while, he can be very close to reaching his goal and having the divine presence reveal itself to him, so that he experiences a revelation of God's kingdom according to his level. But then, on the very last day, this person is tested according to his level. On that day, when everything depends on the person's actions, the evil one and all his cohorts overcome him in a very powerful manner. They speak to him and convince him to take their advice, so that he sees that it is pleasant to the eyes and desirable. He takes the fruit and eats a little bit, failing the test that he had to pass in order to be purified. He then immediately falls asleep. This sleep denotes the loss of the correct states of consciousness, moichin. One then loses the knowledge and wisdom that enlighten him. This being the mystery of Cain. When his face fell, it is written that God asked Cain, "Why has your face fallen?" In the lesson which begins, Rabbi Shimon said in the 60, it speaks about the spiritual blemish brought about through the lust for food. This causes a person to lose his face, which denotes the correct states of consciousness, and he then falls into the concept of sleep. If you look up what is written there, you will understand, since there is considerable discussion of the concept of stories and how they can awaken one from such sleep. During the period that a person is in such a sleeping state, all sorts of bad things can happen to him. In the story, this is alluded to by all the troops that passed by the viceroy when he was sleeping. When the viceroy woke up, he realized that he had been sleeping, and he went back to where the king's daughter was. She told him how pitiful both he and she were, since because of one day he lost everything. She was then more lenient in her requirements, telling him that he need not fast completely, but merely that he must abstain from wine, so that he not fall asleep. Then he strove for a long time serving God, so as to free the king's daughter. But then on the last day, he failed the test again, even though it was relatively easy. He saw a spring flowing with wine and fooled himself, so that he began being drawn to it. He said to his servant, "Don't you see that this is a spring? How can it possibly contain wine?" With that, he took a small amount of the wine and tasted it, immediately falling asleep. He then slept for a very long time. But this is the way of the evil one and his tempters. When they want to trick a virtuous person who wants to avoid temptation, they fool him little by little. They cause him to be curious about the things he desires and wonder about them. Then, when the desire is well entrenched in his mind, the evil one overcomes him and causes him to sin. The Torah presents this sequence explicitly regarding the tree of knowledge. First, the snake engages the woman in conversation and says to her, "Did God then say that you may not eat from any tree in the garden?" The snake wanted to get the woman to think about the tree and wonder about it. It is then written, "The woman saw that the tree was good to eat and desirable to the eye. Look carefully and you will understand." This is the way of all desires and tests. If a man has true intelligence and is truly concerned that his soul escape destruction, he will want to stand up to a test. In order to do so, he must direct his mind away from the object of his desire completely. He must not confront the desire at all, nor should he even speak, think, or wonder about it at all. He should totally avoid letting his thoughts confuse him. It is thus written in the Aleph Beis book, Sefer Midas, "Do not engage in arguments with the one who wishes to tempt you." See what is written there. Rather, a person must take his mind off his desire completely. He should open his mind to the Torah, or even discuss business or other affairs until he is saved from this temptation. When similar thoughts or ideas return, he must again overcome them and take his mind off them. This he must do over and over, being very stubborn until he finally wins the battle. The viceroy in the story failed the test a second time, and he once again fell asleep for a long time. This time he slept for 70 years. The concept of sleeping for 70 years is discussed in the lesson which begins, Rabbi Shimon said, the 60. Some people fall asleep so that they are unconscious of all 70 faces of the Torah, which is the concept of 70 years. In such a case, it is impossible to arouse them except by telling stories of ancient times. Look carefully at what is written there. When the king's daughter, which is the root of a person's soul, passes by and sees that the person has fallen asleep for so many years, she weeps very much. Both he and she are very greatly to be pitied. Then she tells them that she is not in the same place where she originally was, but in another place on a mountain of gold. The parallel is clear. No matter what he did, and regardless of how far he fell during this long period, the divine presence nevertheless tries to awaken him over and over again. Each time she gives him new advice, how to find her and find his holy root, which is the concept of the king's daughter. We thus see that this viceroy failed the task twice and fell asleep for such a long time. He experienced so much travail and suffering in order to find the king's daughter, and then, because of what happened on the last day, he lost everything. He fell twice in this manner, as we have seen earlier. Nevertheless, he did not give up hope. Rather, he went out to seek and find the golden mountain and the castle. Then, with tremendous effort and difficult wanderings, he set off to find the mountain and the castle. Finally, he found a giant carrying a huge tree. The giant put him off and told him, "There is positively no such mountain or castle." The giant tried to talk him out of it and dissuade him so that he would return home. The viceroy, however, refused to be dissuaded or discouraged. He said, "I'm certain that the mountain and castle do exist." Finally got the giant to call together all the animals, but they too insisted that the mountain and castle were non-existent. The giant told the viceroy, "You can see with your own eyes that it is non-existent. Why are you striving so much for nothing? Take my advice and go back." The viceroy did not pay any attention to this and replied, "I'm certain that it exists. I'm certain that it exists." The giant then told him that he should go to his brother, who was in command of all the birds. The viceroy went and expended much effort finding the brother, but when he found him, the second giant also discouraged him and tried to talk him into turning back. The giant insisted, I'm positive that this mountain and castle do not exist." The viceroy refused to accept this discouragement. The second giant had to call together all the birds, but they all replied that there is no place in the world where such a mountain or castle exists. The second giant told the viceroy, "You can see with your own eyes that you are striving for nothing. Go back." The viceroy, however, also refused to pay attention to the second giant, insisting that he has absolute faith that the mountain and castle definitely exist. The second giant then told the viceroy to go to his brother who oversees all the winds. The third giant also discouraged him very much, and he called together all the winds, who answered that no such thing exists. The third giant then said, "See, you must realize that you have been making all this effort in vain. It is obvious that no such thing exists. Return home." The viceroy realized that he had come to the end of the trail, and he did not have anywhere else to turn. But deep inside he was still strong in his faith, and he knew for certain that the mountain and castle existed, and that the king's daughter was there. Because of the great suffering and bitterness that he felt in his heart, he began to weep very much. God then had mercy on him, and a wind arrived and informed him that it had been the wind, which had carried the king's daughter to the mountain and castle. The giant then gave him a purse from which he could take any money he needed, so that lack of money would not be an obstacle. The viceroy then went there and worked hard to devise a plan until he found the king's daughter. Happy is he. If one looks at this with an honest eye, one will understand well how strong a person must be in striving God and serving God. One must realize that in serving God, one's stubbornness must be without measure or limit. This is true of every single person according to his level, no matter how high or low he goes, and no matter what happens to him. One could then look at this story and understand how much struggle and effort the viceroy underwent, only to twice fail an easy test and fall asleep for as long as 70 years. Nevertheless, he did not give up hope. He continued striving and did not pay attention to any obstacles or discouragement placed in the way of his finding his goal. He ignored discouragement and strengthened himself until the giants changed their minds and began to help him. Each one gathered the animals, birds, or winds under his charge. It is true that they subsequently discouraged him all the more, saying that they could not discover anything like this, to exist, but still, he ignored their discouragement, and then each one told him about his brother, until he came to the one who oversaw the winds, and was then able to reach his goal. Even this last giant discouraged him, but he remained strong in his mind, never giving up. No matter what happened, then in one instant, everything was reversed, and all the obstacles and hindrances became means of helping him. All the negative influences became positive influences and means of attaining the goal. In the end, the wind came and told him that it was the one that had brought the king's daughter to the mountain and the castle, and finally this wind carried the viceroy there as well. Look, understand, and see. In each detail of the story you will find allusions and wondrous encouragement, telling how much a person must strengthen himself to probe, seek, and find a way of finding God at all times. This follows from the verse, seek His presence at all times. It may be true that the story itself is higher than our understanding. We have no idea at all what is the meaning of the Golden Mountain, the Pearl Castle, or any of the other concepts mentioned in the story. Nevertheless, all these allusions fit into the general framework and can be understood in the context of the story. One can derive one's own interpretations if one wants. One can derive one's own interpretation if one wants. One can derive one's own interpretations if one wants, and thus find great encouragement. The wise man will hear and expand the lesson. The same is true of all the other stories. The concept of the Golden Mountain and the Pearl Castle allude to the great wealth obtained in a holy manner that one needs for true contemplation. This is discussed in the lesson Rabbi Shimon said, chapter 60, in the first part of the Kitamran. Look into this carefully and you will understand, since this lesson is a commentary on the story, as we understood it from the Rebbe himself. One can go from one concept to another and delve into the story of the sophisticate and the simpleton. To some agree, it is obvious that the lesson of the story is that the main goal is to live with simplicity without any sophistication. If a person looks at the story carefully, then in every word he can see wondrous allusions which will strengthen him in the ways of simplicity. This is the main goal in life in this world, and certainly in the next. Moral lessons beyond compare can also be found in the story of the exchanged children, the master of prayer, and all the more so in the 7 beggars. In this last story, each beggar teaches wondrous, incomparable moral lessons. Each one boasts of his great separation from the worldly in the ultimate sense. Thus, one boasts that he has always been blind, never looking at the worldly at all, since the physical world is no more than the blink of an eye. The deaf beggar boasts that he is totally deaf to all the voices in the world, since they are all deficient. He does not consider the world worthwhile, that he should listen to its shortcomings. Another one boasted that he had never spoken any words other than praise of God, and therefore he has a severe speech impediment when it comes to speaking of worldly matters. Still another boasted that he did not want to add to the vanities and vapors of this world. The same is true of all of them. This must be studied very carefully. If you look with an honest eye, you will stand and tremble in astonishment, and you will become aware of the wonderful moral lesson and encouragement toward God that is found in this story. There is nothing that can be compared to it. Look at our words in the Kitei Halachos. In many places God has enlightened us, as we have been able to interpret the allusions in a number of the stories. Thus, in the laws of Tefillin, there is a discussion of the first beggar, the one who was blind. In the laws of the morning blessings, we discuss the story of the exchanged children. In the laws of prayer, we discuss the story of the master of prayer. In Yeridea, in the laws of worms, we discuss the story of the 6th beggar, the one without hands, who told the story of the king's daughter who ran to a castle made of water. In Even Wezer, in the laws of women, we discuss this same story further, especially insofar as the remedy for the king's daughter is 10 types of song. If you look in other places, you will also find pleasure with God's help. If you look in other places, you will also find pleasure with God's help. Look in the laws of vows regarding the story of the 4th day and the 7 beggars, about the two birds. In the laws of charity, there is a discussion of the story of the 3rd day regarding the beggar with his speech impediment, the heart of the world, and the spring which is above time. May God show us the wonders of His Torah, and may we be worthy to add to our understanding of the allusions in the stories and the words that we were worthy of hearing from this great light. We also found the following among the writings. It is a defense that he offered for writing the stories in such a simple manner. We would like to make people who read the book of stories aware that they should not denigrate them because of the somewhat coarse language that is sometimes employed. Thus, in the first story, he uses the expression, he became angry at her. Likewise, in the story of the exchanged children, he says he took himself to drinking. In all these cases, we must give the story the benefit of the doubt. It was an error uttered by a ruler for some important reason. This is what we have found, and we copied it letter for letter. One can see clearly that Reb Nosson wanted to write a reason for using such expressions. However, it appears that something interrupted him in the middle. and God did not allow us to be worthy of having what he himself wrote. But thank God that we were worthy of being able to copy the above words. Whenever he wished to write a word so that it be revealed to the world, to this world, there were many obstacles because of this. There were many obstacles. Because of this, he was very diligent in writing, as you can see with your own eyes. He always told us that he would make himself all the more diligent to overcome the obstacles. He always told us that he would make himself all the more diligent to overcome the obstacles and write what he wished immediately. He never knew if he would have another opportunity to write it, for many reasons that were known only to him. Now, because I heard that he stated that he wanted to print this work again and write the reason for what we have discussed earlier, I will not refrain from writing one of the many concealed and hidden reasons that he had. This is what I heard from him. May his memory be blessed. Our master Ibn Nachman, may the memory of a tzaddik and holy man be a blessing, told the stories in the Yiddish spoken in our land. Then Rabbi Nosson, may the memory of the righteous be a blessing. The Rebbe's foremost student translated them into Hebrew. He was very careful to use simple language so as not to change the meaning for reading them in Hebrew, and so that they should be understood exactly the same as they were when Rabbi Nachman told them in the Yiddish that is spoken among us. This is the reason that such simple Hebrew expressions are found in many places. It was meant to be as simple as possible. This is besides the hidden reasons that we were not worthy of hearing from him. It is not far-fetched to believe that there are other hidden reasons. It is obvious from his other works that he has a great master of language, but here he lowered himself especially to use simple language. It is therefore fitting to believe that he had an important reason for this. A man of faith shall abound with blessings. Amen. May this be his will. Nachman, Yuma.